VOA News. VOA News. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
The U.S. Navy, 296 ships strong. Thousands of companies build the parts and maintain them, including Fairbanks Morse Defense, the largest engine manufacturer in North and South America.
This engine has about 10,000 horsepower.
CEO George Whittier tells VOA 90% of the company's business goes to the U.S. Navy or Coast Guard. The company, he said, expected the size of the Navy fleet to increase to match Navy force structure goals that get bigger every year. But in recent years, the fleet decreased. Last year's budget funded just 6 new Navy ships, while decommissioning 15 from the fleet.
And then for the 2025 budget plan, originally that was supposed to be 10 new ships, and now they're only going to asking for 6 new ships again, and they want to decommission 19. So that's then down minus 13.
While the U.S. Navy is still considered the most powerful in the world when it comes to firepower and tonnage, the number of U.S. Navy ships is falling behind China's. Its Navy is on pace this year to surpass 400 ships, according to the Pentagon.
It's very frustrating and very challenging to be a supplier. They're rapidly growing the size of their Navy, and here we are on the sidelines. We need to get more ships that are out there.
We send a shipbuilding plan to Congress every year.
Admiral Jim Kilby, the acting chief of naval operations, agrees.
And we've advocated for a bigger Navy for a long time.
But he says he hasn't had the budget to replace all his aging ships and submarines, much less grow the force.
And when we get a new ship, we'll replace an old ship because that old ship is more expensive and harder to maintain.
Whittier says the lack of growth isn't just slowing the maritime defense industry, it's sinking the supply chain.
There's thousands and thousands of suppliers that have gone out of business, and it's a real risk. I got a note from the folks at Electric Boat that make the submarines, and they'd identified something like 350 critical suppliers where they were concerned if they go out of business that they don't necessarily have a backup.
Fairbanks Morse Defense happens to be one of the biggest suppliers to U.S. submarines and the sole U.S. company supplying the biggest engines used in the military's amphibious warfare ships.
Without 4 of these, an amphib is nothing but a piece of metal floating in the water.
Each engine about the size of a small school bus.
We should have 2 engine suppliers, but the reality is if the Navy's only going to build 6 ships a year, it's a struggle to keep 1 engine supplier in business, let alone 2.
A problem so concerning, the president is taking action, announcing this month a new office in the White House devoted entirely to shipbuilding.
We used to make so many ships. We don't make them anymore very much, but we're going to make them very fast, very soon.
Congress is expected to increase the military's budget to surge resources for its shipbuilding shortfalls. While most ships made in the United States are for its military, Senator Mark Kelly tells VOA the state of U.S. commercial shipping is even more dire.
We went from 10,000 ships during World War II to 85 today. So in case of an emergency, in case of a conflict with a near-peer adversary, we're quite limited to getting all those supplies and equipment, troops across the ocean.
The United States builds about 5 commercial ships each year. China builds more than 1,000.
They have one shipyard, just one shipyard that's bigger than all of our shipyards put together. They can construct them very, very quickly. And we just don't do that anymore.
Kelly in December introduced bipartisan legislation called the Ships for America Act. The bill aims to increase the U.S. commercial fleet by 250 ships in 10 years, which will also increase the supply chain for military ships.
A lot of the parts that go into a U.S. aircraft carrier, some of those same parts for those systems go in merchant ships.
Kelly says the bill uses tax incentives and fees on cargo coming into the country to fund the growth.
There are provisions in the legislation to have it fully paid for, so we don't have to add anything to the annual deficit.
Defense industry leaders say they welcome efforts to prioritize shipbuilding to help counter China, and warn inaction will put the U.S. even further behind in the future. The Navy's latest shipbuilding plan only increases its fleet to 380 ships by 2040, still fewer than the number of Chinese naval vessels today. Carla Babb, VOA News, Norfolk, Virginia.
VOA News. VOA News. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.